All right, everyone. I'm going to get us started. Mayor Landrieu will be joining us in a moment. So I'm going to introduce everyone in this section here. This is community policing strategies to reduce homicides, gun violence, and gang violence. We have Mayor Nutter from Philadelphia, past president, elected in 2007, re-elected in 2011. Mayor Nutter has pushed for the reorganization of the police department and made it more streamlined and accountable and better focused on customer service. A major part of his effort was the development of the partnership to promote neighborhood-based policing. Philadelphia now has 64 public service areas through which team of police officers have greatly increased daily community contact and involvement. Let's give our past president, U.S. Conference of Mayors, Mayor Nutter, a round of applause. And Commissioner, we've introduced you 4 times today, so let's just give Commissioner Ramsey a round of applause. All right. City of New Orleans is represented today by Mayor Landrieu. We all know the amazing work that the mayor has done in his community, and it's a strong family tradition. As some of you know, his father, Moon Landrieu, also served as a mayor, and Mayor Landrieu gave one of the most amazing speeches 2 years ago on violence and youth in his community. Let's give a round of applause for Mayor Landrieu. And then we have Mayor Harrison, who was appointed interim superintendent of police by Mayor Landrieu in August. He's a 23-year veteran in the department who rose steadily through the ranks, served most recently as commander of the 7th District overseeing police services in the eastern part of the city. Under his command, the 7th District saw crime reduction in 2012 and 2013. Prior to his appointment, he managed the department's narcotics, vice, and criminal intelligence and gang enforcement. Round of applause for our superintendent. Thank you. All right, I'm going to do this last one out of order. Commissioner Batts was appointed police commissioner in Baltimore, the 8th largest police agency in the U.S., in September of 2012. He has more than 3 decades of law enforcement experience, includes chief of police of 2 California large cities. In Long Beach, he rose through the ranks and served as chief for 10 years, including a brief transition period in which he served as a city manager. He established the Office of Community Policing and reduced the excessive force complaints. Crime there was reduced by 37% from 2002 to 2007. As chief in Oakland, from October 2009 to 2011, he is credited with reforming the city's police agency, focusing on data-driven. Let's give a round of applause for Mayor Batts. And I saved the best for last, no doubt, with all due respect to everyone else up here, the Vice President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and she had her introduction earlier today. I will just say she's the 49th mayor of Baltimore, was elected or appointed in 2010 and elected to her first full term in 2011, receiving 87% of the vote. Round of applause for Stephanie Rawlings-Blake. Do you want to go first?
I can.
Okay. We'll start off with Mayor Rawlings-Blake.
Thank you very much. I hope this is working. All right. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. It was great to be here with Mayor Nutter, Mayor Landrieu, and our police chiefs. It's also good. I know she had to step out, but it was good to be here with former Mayor Lottie Shackelford, who's also the DNC Women's Caucus chair. She's been an inspiration to me, and as I said to Mayor Studela, I said to her, it's a pleasure to be in her city. I keep messing it. Stodela. I'll get it right eventually, or he'll change it to Smith, and we'll be. So I think many of you have heard the reputation of Baltimore as it has, with regards to crime. The Mayor Nutter's favorite television show was based and filmed in Baltimore, and we've followed the evolution of policing strategies that have happened all over the country. We had zero tolerance policing in Baltimore basically resulting in mass arrests. We've moved from, and you know the issues with there. Yes, we suppressed crime, but there were also, when we talk about community policing, that led to some other challenges in our community. We moved to a strategy of targeting the most violent repeat offenders. Again, showed results. Crime went down. But when we still have this strategy today, but it had to evolve because there was a unit that was responsible for an overwhelming majority of the arrests for the violent repeat offenders, but also the majority of the excessive force complaints and police misconduct. So when I hired Commissioner Batts, we decided to disband it. And part of the philosophy of community policing, as we know, is to build the community partnerships with our stakeholders. However, with these types of policing strategies, we didn't have the buy-in that we had hoped to have. And I know I've talked about this before. In 2011, we got the homicide rate down to the lowest it'd been since the 70s, the early 70s. And a rate that most people, when I was coming up, would think it was impossible. And I was not really expecting to be hoisted up on people's shoulders when I went into community meetings, but I really felt like I was going to get, a very positive response in some of the neighborhoods, particularly those who had, the ones that had significant reduction. But as I mentioned to you before, that specialized unit that was responsible for this suppression was also responsible for a significant amount of police misconduct and discourtesy. So when I went to those communities, yes, the crime was down, but they were mad about it. They hated, in some communities in Baltimore, they hated the crime, but hated the police more. And we knew that we had to do something. We had to do something to change that. The commissioner and I have been stressing the need to regain that trust. We know we can't do it alone. We have to be tough on crime, but it can't be at the expense of the community. We can't allow citizens to feel mistreated and under siege in their own communities and then expect those same community members to want to work with us in partnership. We've been trying very hard to repair this relationship. In fact, last year we have tripled the amount of citizens that are calling in with tips to the police, and I'm encouraged with the progress we've made. However, recently, unfortunately, like many cities across the country, we've had some incidents of police misconduct that not just happened, but were caught on tape, and that, again, erodes the public trust. So it feels like we've taken, 3 steps forward and 1 step, 2 steps back. And we had as I mentioned before, we had a 30-year low in homicide, and but when we had to push back that, when we disbanded that unit, we saw a spike. And we know that as we reevaluate how we're dealing with the police brutality, we're going to have to challenge some of those same notions as well. So a lot of the things that we're talking about, and the other mayors are going to be talking about, this is, none of this happened overnight. And to change this is going to take a long, I know it's a long process, but I'm also committed to making those changes in collaboration with the community, because I think that's the only way, and I talked about this at the press conference, that we're going to be able to see sustainable change. So with that, I would say that I'm turning it back over to, I will turn it over to my commissioner, and hopefully I haven't taken all of his talking points, and we'll talk about what we've done, and I'm looking forward to having a great dialogue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the things I have to say is that in the stage of my career, I get to pick and choose who I want to work for, and it was lucky she picked me. But I picked mayors who actually have a genuine love for the community, and I'm very lucky to work for a very good mayor who genuinely loves her community. And I'm at the point where I call strikes and balls. I don't BS, and I don't try to kiss up to anyone, and I tell it how I feel. I was mentored by Chuck Ramsey, and you'll feel that in a second. He's a very straight shooter. Whether it's ceasefire, and some of what I'm going to say we've been talking about today, I'll warn you now for you guys who've been sitting here a long time. Whether we're talking about ceasefire program, the great program that deals with gangs, DARE, PAL, legitimacy programs, which are starting now, community policing, hotspot policing, zone policing, walking beats, community academies, gang injunctions, CompStat, safe streets programs, pull and levers, neighborhood watch, violent repeat offenders, explorers, or cadets. This session deals with programs that bring the community closer. I don't think it has to do with any of that. And what I'm going to talk about today is a little counterintuitive, and we've talked about it, and I'm going to bring it home a little bit more. You see, in Baltimore, crime is down in every category. Every category from violent crime to property crime, crime is down. Use of force, complaints are down 45%. Internal affairs complaints, dramatically down. Lawsuits, down. Trust, almost non-existent. So we could have all those metrics and say we're doing a good job, but the bottom line is there's a lack of trust within this city as it relates to my police department. As my mayor has said, there's in some communities, there's almost a visceral hatred for this uniform that I wear. I want to be very clear in what I say. You see, I'm a police officer. I just happen to be the rank of a commissioner. And if you cut me, I bleed blue. This is what I do. This is what I've always done. This is what I believe in. I am a police officer, and I love being a police officer. I can tell you another thing is that I grew up in South Central LA. I grew up a poor kid, holes in my pants, holes in my shoes, eating fried bologna sandwiches for dinner. That's the family I came from. Drugs, prostitution, all the dysfunctionality that in many of these urban environments, that's where I grew up. In my neighborhood, they hated Los Angeles Police Department. In my neighborhood, they didn't like police, period. Why I say that is that I remember April 29th, 1992, riots started in the city that I grew up in, South Central Los Angeles. 11,000 people were arrested, 2,000 injured, 53 dead. Pain is what they were trying to get across. Pain. It didn't start that day on April 29th, 1992. It started 5 years before. It started 10 years before. August 2014, you had a young man who lost his life in Ferguson. It didn't start on that day. Those riots didn't come from that. It started 5 years before. It started 10 years before. You know, when I was growing up, and the reason I do my job is when I was growing up in South Central LA, I wondered, did anybody give a damn whether I lived or died? Did anyone value my life? That pain that you saw in South Central LA, the pain that you see in Ferguson, the pain that we're talking about is, does anybody give a damn about black lives being lost? That's really what that's about. When that young man laid out there in that street for hours, people were saying, you don't have a value for that human life. I think I'm going to say something that may piss people off. And I'm going to say it anyway, because that's what Chuck Ramsey told me to do. We as police departments have been part of the problem. And that's a counterintuitive statement. We have been part of the problem in our communities because we felt that we've been doing God's work. We felt that we've been going out, making an arrest. When the community says, do something. When rock cocaine is impacting our neighborhoods, drive-by shootings are taking place, people are dying, they're saying, do something. What we did is we responded with the only tool that we knew at that time, which was to arrest people. By arresting large groups of African-American males in communities, we decimated those communities. But we felt we were doing God's work with the tools that we had. We made it worse. And it comes to a point where we have to say that we've been part of the problem. And until we say we've been part of the problem, we cannot start to become part of the solution. So it's not about programs. It's not about that list of things that I read off at the beginning of this. It's about trust and care. I said in my community, we don't have trust that's there. I have to bring in an outside agency to validate the things that we're doing in the correct way are the correct things to be done because we don't have trust or credibility. And until my organization that I lead, that I'm responsible for, that I'm a part of the legacy, starts to say we've been part of the problem, now we want to be part of the solution, we're not going to solve anything. It's not about programs. It's about genuinely loving the people. You know, I was talking to someone last night about President Clinton. And I said, what is it about him? He has this it. The times that I've met him before, he has this thing. And they said it's because he genuinely cares about people. Police departments today genuinely have to care about the people. police departments today have to give a damn about that 8-year-old kid and whether that 8-year-old kid will survive. The reason I wear this uniform today is because a mentor of mine was a police officer in a community that didn't like police officers. We make a difference. We make an impact. We have to change and change the words of trust and care. They're not buzzwords. Thank you very much.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you for staying. We've been together all day. It would be pointing out the obvious to say that it might be slightly warm in the room, which presents its own challenges. So I do greatly appreciate folks hanging in there with us. The President has put together an action-packed agenda as we do at USCM. I'm going to keep my remarks brief, and I know that Commissioner Ramsey has been up a couple times as well. I'd like to just leave as much time as possible for the Q&A and get into some things. Commissioner Batts ran through a series of programs that the mayor and he have implemented in Baltimore. I could run through a similar list of things in the city of Philadelphia. You know that it's not any one thing, it's a series of things. It's about a holistic approach to fighting crime. It's not just the responsibility of the Philadelphia Police Department or the Baltimore Police Department or the New Orleans Police Department. We've had great success under Commissioner Ramsey, a nearly 40% reduction in homicides in our city. We've got focused deterrence. We've had some tremendous support from the COPS program, why we're here today, and the weapons legislation back at the time. We participate in the National Forum for Youth Violence Prevention. We're helping returning citizens. We're investing in job training, youth engagement, working with the district attorney, the courts, trying to get young people summer jobs, ban the box legislation, decriminalize small amounts of marijuana, created other programs to get young people back on track, Philly Future Track, Power Corps PHL. I can give you all kinds of information about those programs. My team is here, the commissioner's here, Deputy Mayor Gillison, City Rep Desiree Peterkin Bell, First Deputy Tumar Alexander. Fantastic. The one thing that we have not talked about in the course of this entire day is guns. 85% of the homicides in the city of Philadelphia are committed with a gun. We are seemingly paralyzed to have any more discussion anymore about the fact that illegal weapons on the streets of our cities are responsible for the overwhelming majority of homicides and violent crime in our cities. We cannot give up on the fact that we have to attack that issue. Illegal guns, the scourge of our cities and our nation. Illegal guns. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I do firmly believe that I have a First Amendment right not to be shot. And until people can walk down the street, Mayor Landrieu can tell you chapter and verse about things in New Orleans. I can tell you about a 3-year-old girl who was sitting on the steps getting her hair braided a couple months ago. Knucklehead starts shooting, stray bullet, kills her. I can tell you about a 15-year-old girl coming home from school. Argument breaks out a half a block down the street. Stray bullet hits her in the back. She's dead. The list goes on and on and on. We cannot be afraid to take on the great major challenge of illegal guns in this country. One of the proudest days of my entire 20-plus years now of being in elective office. 14 and a half as a city council member, 6.5 plus now as mayor. On my 100th day in office as mayor, I was sued by the NRA. One of the proudest moments of my entire elected political career. You are known by your enemies. Because we had the audacity to put forward 5 pieces of legislation, one of which was that you had to at least report a lost or stolen weapon. I don't know that many people that lose their guns. But if you at least want to make a claim on your stolen car, you have to report it. We didn't see what the burden was in requiring people to report their lost or stolen weapon. We were sued. We won. We cannot be afraid to take on the great challenge of illegal guns in our cities across the United States of America. They and the people who have them, who did not buy them in a store, are killing people. And as Mayor Landrieu pointed out, and I'll end with this, somewhere between 30 and 40 people will be killed, murdered in the United States of America today and tomorrow and the next day, because every 15 days in this country, 435 people are murdered in the United States of America. Now that 435 number may ring a bell with you. It's the exact same number of seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. Every 15 days in the United States of America, the greatest country in the world, 435 Americans are murdered in this country. You will not see that at the bottom of the ticker tonight on CNN. You will not see that tonight on the bottom of the scrolling ticker on MSNBC. There will not be day-long news programs about that fact. But we have apparently resumed the search for the airplane that was lost, and we are still looking for that. As Police Commissioner Ramsey said, and it is a tragedy that Mr. Duncan died, but we certainly have another pandemic, epidemic in this country. It is violence. We have a violence problem in the United States of America. We need to recognize it, own it, and then come up with a plan, like we are for everything else that we care about in this country, to fight it. Because 10, 11, 12, 13,000 Americans mostly needlessly die at the hands of other Americans, most of whom they know, and just because the person may have been engaged in illegal activity or is considered a bad person doesn't mean that that life was not valuable. Every life is precious in the United States of America, and we should act like it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just start by saying that I'm really blessed to have the opportunity to work for someone like Michael Nutter. It does make a huge difference in terms of who you're partnered with. I mean, and that's the way we look at it as partners. We're in it together. We work together. And so, Mayor, thank you so much for everything that you do, not only for the city, but what you've done in support of me. Listen, there's a whole list of strategies, and everybody knows what they are. No one strategy really is standing alone is going to make a difference. But I want to talk about a couple challenges, and one of which I want to make sure isn't lost, and it's something that Commissioner Batts said that I think is terribly important. The larger the organization, the more difficult it is to really align everybody with whatever strategy you have. And we certainly have a strategy in Philadelphia that has been articulated. We constantly pound it. We constantly try to get people to understand it. And that's very difficult. But once you achieve it, you start to see results. And I like to compare it to if you go to a symphony. And when you get there early, all the musicians are kind of tuning their instruments, and it just sounds like a lot of noise. But when the conductor gets there and begins the actual concert, it's beautiful music. And you have to get everybody playing together, whether they're a specialized unit, whether they're basic patrol, whether they're investigative, whatever it is. And that's not easy because, for years and years and years in policing, we kind of measure success based on stats. And everybody wants those stats, and they're not looking at the outcome. Once you're able to achieve that, then you start to see a lot of progress, and you learn an awful lot from it. But having said that, that brings up one of the flaws in policing that I think almost leads to some of the issues that Tony raised about us being part of the problem. And there's a couple things in that area. I think one is the fact that we have measured for decades success based on numbers. Back in the 1920s, the FBI came up with Part 1 index crimes, your major, murder, rape, robbery, and so forth. And every year, that's how we're measured. I mean, really, there's only one category that matters in the minds of the public, and that seems to be homicide. One of the crimes that occur with less frequency, however, is the one barometer that's used to measure effectiveness. So we get our numbers down, but then we have to ask ourselves at what cost? And when Tony said that, he's down in every category of crime, but when he looks at one measure, and that's trust, it's non-existent. It's time that we refocus and change what we use to measure success. And I think that, not that, the number of crimes occurring is not important, but what difference does it make if in the course of trying to achieve that, you alienate the very community that you are supposed to be serving, that you're supposed to be helping? And that seems to be what's happening in many instances, not across the board, but in many instances, particularly in our more challenged neighborhoods. And I go back to something I said earlier, and it was mentioned again recently by the chief, was that West Sacramento? Yeah. How police view themselves influences how they behave. And so when we talk about the role of police in a democratic society, we talk about constitutional policing. These are the things that we do not do nearly a good enough job, in my opinion, of reinforcing, is how they view themselves. Do you want to be seen as a warrior or as a guardian? That's a concept that someone named Sue Rohr from Washington State mentioned at a meeting that I attended, and I think she hit it right on the money. Are we law enforcement, or do we refer to ourselves as the profession of policing having a much broader definition than just enforcing laws? Are we a thin blue line, or are we really a thread that's really woven throughout the communities we serve that actually helps hold together the very fabric of that community? How we perceive ourselves influences how we behave. And so we can quote crime numbers and crime stats, and numbers are down. The bottom line is a lot of people are fearful, but they're not fearful just of crime. They're also trapped because they're fearful of police. They're fearful of the measures that we may take in order to regain control of the streets that will impact them, impact their kids, and so forth. And we've got to rethink. Again, we have an opportunity here, and I think that the recession actually was a good thing in that it really forced us to refocus our energies within departments, to reorganize, because we simply don't have the personnel to waste. And so we had to really kind of think about what we're doing and how we're doing it. Well, we need to think about how it impacts the communities that we serve. And if we really want true community policing, then we have to do these things, because I believe you can have both. I think you can have an impact on crime, and I think you can take that one metric that you measured, and I think it can start to go up. And I think that it can remain high. And when we've got that, then we truly do have community policing. Then we truly do have safe and secure communities. Then we can have the debates about guns. We can have the debates about all the other things that we need to talk about, whether it's black-on-black crime, whatever it may be, without the defensive positions that people tend to take, because the trust is there to be able to have the conversations that we need to have. So I'll end with that and pass it on to Mayor Landrieu.
Thank you, Chief. I am, first of all, thrilled to be with all of you today, and I think the discussion has been provocative, and I want to adopt, as we can as lawyers, all the comments that have been made by the folks up here, because they have been very deep and poignant. When Katrina hit New Orleans and destroyed the city, lots of stuff happened. A lot of people came to help. Some people wondered why we lived where we lived. But mostly everybody thought it was a one-off. They thought that it kind of just happened to us, maybe because we have go-cups and we stay up late and we do things and have fun in New Orleans, and maybe we deserved it. And that it didn't really relate to the rest of the country. And I remember telling people, don't make that mistake. New Orleans is just like every place else. As a matter of fact, we're the canary in the coal mine. Now, I had to explain that to my 23-year-old daughter, who didn't understand that. And one of my staff members said that's a bad analogy anyway because the canary died. And the people in the Northeast didn't think that could happen to them until, of course, Sandy hit and the bridge broke in Minneapolis. And then people really began to understand that what happened in New Orleans was an engineering failure, and it was about a bigger issue that affected everybody else in the country. And in that regard, I think that what we are witnessing, but we don't seem to fully appreciate and understand, is that Gina, Louisiana, and what happened there, what happened in Los Angeles with Rodney King, what happened with Trayvon Martin, what happened in Ferguson is a clarion call. It is the canary in the coal mine. It is a message being sent that we do not pay attention to because it's not all happening at one time, and then our attention gets diverted, and we turn away from what is that really? And then we fall into discussions like we had today. Is it why are we marching in Ferguson, but we're not marching when black kids kill black kids? In my opinion, there is a common thread, and Chief Betts, you spoke about this, and this is what I believe it is. I believe that in America, the chickens are coming home to roost as it relates to the fact that we do not value the lives of young African-American men. And I believe that they are telling this every day in the ways that they act, in the ways that they act properly and improperly, in the ways that when they're killed, if we don't handle the investigation or the things that go on appropriately, you have a message that continues to almost be yelled at us across the community, and it can be very confusing because it is. I think there's a reason why we don't report the 40 murders is because it's not like you dropped a bomb on a neighborhood in Palestine or in Israel and you can see the 40 bodies at once. As a matter of fact, you can't see them at all because this media that picks it up are individual media stories all over the country and nobody connects it. And so because we can't see it, right, much like the domestic violence video that all of us saw, once we saw it, we knew it, we somehow do not respond to it. And I think that we live at peril if we do not figure out how to get to the essence and the spirit and the soul of what it is that we're talking about. So all of these folks that are sitting on this podium, I'm thrilled to call partners, and we have worked, when I tell you every day, our teams have worked on this very issue. It is really, really hard. It's hard to talk about. It's politically dangerous to talk about. It's uncomfortable to talk about. And it's essentially almost impossible to get to the truth because we won't recognize where we've been and where we need to get. Now, the folks up here, Mayor Nutter gave you a whole list. The mayor of Baltimore gave you a whole list. We're doing the same thing in New Orleans. It's called NOLA for Life, and we're drilling down on everything. President Clinton said today, you know, when you shoot something with a shotgun that you should shoot with a .22, you might think about it, and there's a lot of difference between the cup and the lip. Now, from those of you that are not from the South, you may not recognize those statements, but Joe does in terms of how we talk about things. We have to get much smarter and much better and really change the spirit of what we do as mayors and as police officers to get back and heal the community. Because in my city, we're at a 30-year low, too, on murder. And I, like the mayor, was expecting people to say, hey, attaboy, good job. But you know what? That did not come. And instead of being disappointed, and I have to ask, why didn't that come? Why, if we're really working hard, isn't it getting there? Because you know what? Even on our best day that we've had in 30 years, which is what we're having now, we are still so bad. We are still not doing the right things by the communities. When we talk about opportunity gaps and all the things that have happened in the community that do not give young men of color and other folks even the opportunity, from the day they're born, they're way behind. And at some point in time, and I think it happens to be around 6 or 7, the light starts to go off and it becomes really clear that something's different about the way they're living versus somebody else. Why do you know this? Every one of you goes to a wonderful little pre-K or summer program and you see beautiful little children and they will run up to you and they will hug you, they will love you, they will look in your eyes and you will ask them, baby, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a nurse. I want to be the president of the United States. But if you go back to the summer camp, 9, 10, or 11, and you talk to young boys, the light starts to dim. The excitement starts to go away. If you go back when they're 12 or 13 or 14, you're likely to find them someplace other than where they have been. And this goes on and on and on and on. And the fact that only a small proportion of them actually grow up to be the ones that either are shot or get shot, the fact of that activity that takes place in their neighborhood completely destabilizes those communities and those children who have to see that and watch that every day. And this is a huge problem in the United States of America that will not be solved by making more arrests, making sure that the prosecution gets done more quickly, making sure that we do better, right, and more community policing. We have a very, very serious problem in this country. And as President Clinton said, I hope that we are arriving at the moment where we can speak about it honestly and forcefully, because let me tell you something, our future really depends on it. I don't know about your city, but I'm telling you that in my city, that's 65% African American, there is no way that this city will survive, notwithstanding all of the great things that are going on there, unless we solve this essential problem that will keep more than half of the community behind. I'm going to give you two numbers. I've got 52% of the African American men in my city are not working. 52%. Now, I want you to think about what that number means. That's actually 38,000 men are not working. 7,000 of them are in Angola. That's one number. The other one I want you to remember is this. Since 1980,
Could you tell me where Angola is?
Angola is our maximum security prison that's a couple of hundred miles away from the city of New Orleans. 7,000.
You can send them to Africa.
Right. No, thank you. He said I didn't send him to Africa. Here's the other number. Angola is the name of our maximum security prison. Everett, I told you. Here's the other number that I want you to, when you think about epidemics, and you think about the potential death rate from Ebola, which could be catastrophic, or you think about the wars that we're having right now, and some of the other mayors have already heard this number. Since 1980, 630,000 American citizens have been killed on the streets of America. 628,000, plus or minus some. That is more American citizens that were killed in all of the wars in the 20th century. World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, all of them, Iraq, Afghanistan, the whole number. Now, if that is not something that would make you stop and say something's wrong, we got to fix that problem, because we can't survive as a civilized society unless we become less violent and find a way to create a culture of safety, whatever that might mean to any of us, however we might get there, the left, the right, the middle, then we are not ever going to attain the kind of growth that we need as a nation. And besides not being able to protect the rest of the world, if we can't protect ourselves at home and not have it to be an either or but a both and, I just don't think that America is going to hit the marks that we all know she has the capacity and the capability to hit. And we've got to drill down on those issues in a very honest, forthright way, and let the discussion take us wherever it will. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank all of our mayors and chiefs. Thank all of you. I'm very delighted to be here. I am very new to this leadership position. I was appointed interim superintendent by Mayor Landrieu on August 18th, so today is my 52nd day. And I find myself extremely confused why I am speaking after Chief Batson, Chief Ramsey, who spoke for the most part of the morning. But as you heard President Johnson say, I've been with New Orleans Police over 23 years, quite a few different areas. Most recently, served as commander of the 7th District in Eastern New Orleans, the largest landmass, and if you're from New Orleans, arguably probably the most violent part of the city. But I heard the complaints of the citizens there. I was with them as much, if not more, than I spent time in my station with our officers. But I also know what our officers need and what they don't always have, because I was just there. Served 10 years in our Public Integrity Bureau, so I'm very aware and very appreciative for the relationship between the community, the strained relationship between the community and the police department. Having served both in my younger days as a narcotics detective and then later in my career as the commander of Narcotics Vice Intelligence, I understand the gang and drug dynamic that leads and promotes this culture of violence. So we have a murder reduction initiative in the city that's very robust, and it's working. And as the mayor said, we are at a 30-year low. But that's our top priority. But I have, as a new chief, quite a few top priorities: growing a very shrinking department, and improving the relationship between the police department and the community. And I see improving that relationship in two ways. One, rebuilding relationships that were never built and repairing the ones that were broken. But it can't just be me. It has to be every officer on the police department. So right now, we are rebuilding and rebranding the New Orleans Police Department. And so in rebuilding, while many departments are shrinking, we are actually growing. We're trying to reach a level of 1,600 by 2018. Right now, today, we are at 1,145. And so to give you some history, for problems that are not of this mayor's fault before he came into office, there's some problems that bled over into us. We weren't able to hire for 3 years, but yet through attrition, we lost 100 officers a year. So to get to 1,600 by 2018, we have a very aggressive recruitment strategy. So in this murder reduction plan, I have to grow a police department. And to get us back to community policing where we're going, there are ways we're going to go about doing that. Right now, we have 2 classes that are going in the academy, one of which graduates early November, the other one in February. We hope to start another class the week after this first class graduates. And as a result of our recruiting efforts, we anticipate increasing, if not doubling, class size and class frequency, which is going to help us beat this attrition rate of losing 100 a year, which we weren't able to hire for 3 years. But we've turned the ship around, and now it's moving forward. Thanks to a COPS grant of $1.8 million that we just were awarded last week, and I signed for, we're going to be able to hire 15 officers exclusively for community policing. So we're investing in our infrastructure. We're working on increasing pay and offering other incentives to help with retention, which is a major problem. We're working through federal consent decree reforms. A little over 1 year into a consent decree, we're making great progress by reforming our policies so that they can be strong as we grow, enhancing our training at every level, from technical and tactical to leadership and career development. We're investing in new equipment and technology to help our officers perform their jobs better. For example, this May, we implemented one of, if not the largest body-worn camera programs in the country, with over 400 cameras on the street, and we're buying more cameras this year. To that point, we talked about this earlier this morning. Since May, we have exonerated over 25 officer complaints, and there are only 1 or 2 that actually found that officers actually did something wrong. So it's really working in our favor. We got some pushback in early days, but we're really beginning to get buy-in from our camera program. So we're strengthening our community policing program with smart deployment strategies that build in time for officers to patrol in various ways, to participate in activities, to develop those community partnerships. I expect our officers to know, I expect our residents to know who the officers are that are patrolling those streets, and I expect our officers to know the residents they serve every day to protect. Just last week, there was an article in our local newspaper on the front page with photographs and all about one of our commanders, a group of officers, and me playing basketball with a group of kids at a local playground. Now, that's a great story, but it was only one in years. To that point, I was always a fan of you when you played in an NBA, but now that you're in politics, I think if we played, I could probably take you. So that's the department we're building. It got a little tight, so I tried to loosen it up. That's the department we're building. That's the direction we're going. We have officers and supervisors that are assigned to just quality of life enforcement. We have supervisors whose only duties are to regularly meet with neighborhood associations and presidents and coordinate all the communication to and from neighborhood associations. So we're making progress, but there's more work to be done. We envision a police department that has officers on every shift, every day, that are totally dedicated to building community partnerships, from playgrounds to churches to businesses to schools, all the way to kitchen tables. So I say this everywhere I go, and Chief Batts said this, we're saying it differently, but it's the same message, and I say this everywhere I go. For too long, we've delivered police services that we thought the citizens needed in the way we thought we should deliver it. Going forward, we want to deliver the police services that the community and the police agree they need, and we want to deliver those services in the way we agree to deliver them. That is, to be tough on the problem, not on the people. Thank you. Very good. Thank you. Very good.
All right, awesome. So at this point in time, we have a chance to have a little interaction. All right, Chief, you're up.
I find myself in the company of old friends in a very strange place. I've been listening to mayors and listening to chiefs and being one for decades now. And one would imagine that this should have been a celebration. 30 years of a decline in crime. My hometown, when I was the counsel for Commissioner Bratton and Commissioner Brown, 25 years of a decline in crime so dramatic that it led the nation. And for a lot of years, I truly felt like I was alone. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm alone in this company of mayors and commissioners. Because if we were a conference of doctors or engineers, then if our mission was crime decline, one would imagine we would be celebrating our success. And our citizens would be thanking us, Mayor. And it's remarkable that you see that they don't. Because they don't. They don't thank any of us. And I've thought about that for a long time, because if the graph is crime going down and down and down, and that's how the people see our job, then why isn't satisfaction with us going up? But it hasn't been. Now, the New Haven Police Department is one of the oldest departments in the nation. We celebrated our 150th anniversary in 2011, which is kind of hard to understand when we've been policing in New Haven for more than 250 years. How did we get the math wrong that we just celebrated our 150th anniversary? And the reason is because of the uniform we wear. Because people think we are tied to the military. People think our past and our tradition is the military. And it isn't. Our past and our tradition is the citizenry. We are a citizen police force. We have nothing to do with the tradition of Europe, of Africa, of South and Central America, which all have a military history for their police. We come from the citizenry. So policing 250 and 300 years ago in America was the citizen who was the night watch that night. And they were trusted by their community because they were of their community. And over 100 years, they became the constable, which simply meant they were paid. Still no police department. Do you know what the first precinct police station in America was built for? It was built in New York City. It was built in the Bowery for the police to put the homeless in at night. It wasn't even for the police officers. And somewhere along the way, we lost our way. That we thought we were doing the right job. And it turns out words matter. You don't go to war against your own people. The words I've heard from you make me, are compelling. We have really lost our way in American policing. We have succeeded in remarkable ways, and probably the most fascinating part of community policing, because I was there at its birth. Those conversations that actually started in the 70s and were only heard in the 80s and finally recognized in the 90s actually came from within the profession. It was a remarkable act of self-criticism. We realized the consequences of what we were doing were more damaging than the results. And now people like the Commissioner of Baltimore or Philadelphia, New Orleans can articulate it as their mayors can. I was going to save most of this for tomorrow, and I wasn't really sure how much I was going to say or the mayor was going to let me say. But the way we've lost our way has cost us the treasure we value the most. We've lost trust. We've lost trust in the community. And it turns out the trust doesn't come from the uniform anymore. It doesn't come from the badge of office. It only comes from the person in it. There's an expression in our business that the uniform and the rank does not make us believe in the person, but rather the person is what makes us believe in the rank and the uniform. So community policing is an effort to work past the uniform, is to realize that what Chief Ramsey is doing, and I remember my old friend when I consulted for him when he was running the CAPS program in Chicago before Washington found him and Philadelphia was smart enough to grab him. But I remember years ago when budgets were cut And the chief stood up and said, I had to give up walking beats for the budget. And he stood up and said, I added walking beats in Philadelphia when we cut the budget. I never forgot that because I was so proud of him. And I'm happy to see that today, I think he and I are the only cities left in America that when you graduate the police academy, it don't matter who your last name is or who your hook, or the expression we use in New York is who your rabbi is. You walk a beat, every single one of you, for the first year of your life, period. Permanent beat, permanent neighborhood. And the reason we do that is not just to build a relationship of trust, but it's to humble an officer when we give him this remarkable power, this absolute remarkable power that we give these young people in the community. And it humanizes both sides of that uniform. And it rebuilds trust, which is the casualty we have lost, which is what allows a citizen to say, I have an issue with my police department, I have an issue with my chief, but I don't have an issue with my officer. And to give words to your feelings. What I learned in my other life as a Yale professor, never got to be a Yale student, but it was a hell of a consolation prize when I became chief of police, was to become a Yale professor. And I realized why I never became a Yale student. Is if you listen to young black men, and I have one who's my son, you learn that what follows pain and fear is fury. And that's what's going on in Ferguson. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Chief Summers from Sacramento, the chief. Yep.
First of all, I appreciated all the comments. I think they're right on, and I think that we're in a transition. You know, I looked at Ferguson, and I also looked at the downturn of the economy as a great opportunity. Even though our organization got cut 35%, and it was devastating to our organization, it gave us an opportunity to see what we valued, and also how are we going to police the city of Sacramento with 500 cops. I mean, you're talking about 1 per 1,000 basically is what we were getting down to when you looked at all the officers that were actually doing the work. So how do you do it? You got to get your citizens involved. And that's what it's about. And so we've kind of transitioned. And I think along the way also, I've been doing this for 31 years and I'm second generation. You kind of learn a lot of things. You know, when you start out, you're a crime fighter, right? Because that's what we're all taught to do. We're going to go fight crime. And then as you kind of get into this after a lot of years, you realize that it's not about crime fighting, it's about crime preventing. Because you got to work with the citizens, and we just kind of, I think we did lose our way, you know, and maybe it was glorified in TV and media or whatever, and you know, it was about the big shootout and about catching the bad guys, but somewhere along the way we lost the community, and so now it's all about an opportunity here because we have a discussion that's a national discussion, and we have an opportunity to go out there and capture the community, and I think it's a great opportunity. But with that, I thought you hit on some great things, Commissioner, and you talked about homicides and how we measure, what's a safe community, or how do we look at it? What do we tell our officers? And so it comes back is, what do we measure going forward? You know, for years we measured arrest and how fast you got to a call, citations, how many stops you made. But I think we have to develop new metrics. I think those are important, and they're good barometers, and I don't think we can toss them out. I think we have to keep the Part 1 crime because you got to know where you are. But what is the metrics that we're going to use here going forward to really show that we're connecting and working with the community? That's my question.
Commissioner?
Let me just say that, you know, we raised this issue in a meeting a couple years ago, and NIJ was there, and currently there is a group that is working on trying to develop what those metrics should be. And I think it's a good thing that we're finally starting to recognize that Part 1 crime in and of itself, whereas there's some value in it, but it doesn't really do anything in terms of really telling us just how safe and secure our communities are, and really just how effective we are in terms of providing that. But there's something else I really want to say here, because I think that's important, that we don't beat ourselves up too much here. We've made tremendous progress over the last 20, 30 years in policing and in just running cities. And we've learned an awful lot. That doesn't mean we can't improve, because I think that's part of what this discussion is all about. I don't know if we've really lost our way, and if we have, we certainly have a GPS at our disposal. We can find our way back pretty quickly. And I think that's really what this is all about. We're at a point now, 20 years down the road, where, we're saying, okay, we've made some tremendous progress. But I think it's important that we lean forward and look into the future and say, yeah, but, we've left a few folks behind. How do we bring them up now to where they need to be, where we need to be collectively as a society, as a community? And we need to have that discussion. And we need to realize that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, that we have to really kind of tailor it to the particular community that we're there to serve. What about the police officers that are out there day in and day out? We've not paid a whole lot, and it hadn't even come up, the mental health of the police officers that have to deal with this crap every day and see it every day. We talk about PTSD and soldiers who do a year overseas or 2 or 3 tours of duty. What about cops that have been exposed to it for 20, 25, 30 years? And we think about the physical health of our officers. What about the mental health of our police? There's a lot of moving parts here. And it's time for us to have a serious discussion about all this and figure out how we can put in place systems that really help everybody who's involved. Because if we can do that, then by default, we start to have stronger communities, better departments, the trust factor, all these kinds of things that we've been talking about. But we can't do it in a piecemeal fashion. And that's the issue I have with the federal government. And it was great to hear the Attorney General say that they're looking at this commission. We've been pushing for a commission for a while. There hasn't been one since LBJ was President of the United States. I would argue a lot has happened since LBJ was President of the United States. And we need to be thinking about those challenges, and we need to do it in a holistic fashion. And that's the only way we're going to be able to tackle these very complicated issues that we've been talking about.
All right, we're going to do Mayor Landrieu, and then we'll come to you.
I want to be very clear about this. I am very optimistic and hopeful and feel very strongly that we can find an answer to this problem. There is no doubt that, as the chief said, we have a GPS system, and we are smart enough if we are courageous enough to address the right questions and to address the right problems. You got to look. We all do this as mayors, and I know you do it as police chiefs. We are problem solvers. That is essentially what we do. Bereft, in many ways, are not bent ideologically one way or the other. If you are left or you're right, and you become a mayor, you'll get middle real quick. Because you either have to find a way or you make one. That is what we do. But you have to ask the right question, and you have to be courageous enough to go to the hardest place. Then you design a strategy, then you put the resources together, then you find the political will to get it done. This is not, as President Clinton said today, rocket science. I'll give you an example on the COPS program. And Ron, thank you so much for the grant that you guys have given to New Orleans. But here is a fact for you, and you didn't have anything to do with this. Since 1996, funding for the COPS program has been decreased by 88%. In 1994 and 96, it meant 300 police officers to the city of New Orleans. Today, thank you though, it means 15. Resources do matter. As Tom Cochran said the other day, an app can't show up to put out a fire. You need a fire truck, and you need a body, and you need resources to do the job. That is one of the things that is absolutely necessary. You cannot do something with nothing. Resources are really important. And so as we have this national discussion about the size of the federal government and the role of the state government and the role of the local government, you do not hear the federal government today saying that they do not have a role in stopping the spread of Ebola. That's not what you hear. What you hear is everybody's got to be here every day, all hands on deck, federal, state, local, because this is a national security crisis. That same approach to crime is necessary. It worked in the 90s. Why did we stop doing something that worked? And there are lots more examples on the mental health, on public and private partnerships, on education, and on workforce development that we know will get into the communities and give these young men a better alternative to do with it. We know the answer. The question is, do we have the political will and the guts to actually do it and make it happen?
Chief?
Yes. In the vein of what Chuck said earlier.
Identify yourself so everybody knows.
Kenton Buckner, Chief of Police, Little Rock. In the vein of what Chuck said earlier of not beating ourselves up too much, and also of having the guts, as the mayor from New Orleans stated. I have a few rhetorical questions based on today in totality. One of the gentlemen on the panel described Michael Brown as a son, a brother, a beloved member of his family. All those things were true. And we all recognize that there were certainly opportunities for improvement as to the way that thing handled, and we still don't know what all happened there. But here's the question. What would the store owner of that business describe him as? Next question. We talk about trust. Well, chiefs, what are you going to do to gain our trust in our community? Valid question. Answer that and then ask the question. Are you going to do things to gain our trust? There's a reason why I set certain people down on the sidewalk and tell you to cross your legs. That's based upon experience that I've dealt with something in that area that tells me that I need to do that. Are you going to have the guts to say that at the podium and articulate why we do some of the things that we do? And then we say we have a disproportionate number of black and brown people in prison. As an African-American man, I can tell you I certainly agree with that. Question, if we're responsible for some of that, what percentage of that culpability rests with the man who was selling the dope? What about the guy who pulled the trigger? Do you have some culpability for this disproportionate number of black and brown in prison? You can't put all of that on the police. Question. If we talk about the things that are going on in our community and all of these things, if I were an officer sitting in here today and I see this needle moving, and the needle needs to move, we recognize that there's a national conversation that needs to be had. But if I was an officer watching this at a distance, I've only heard about all of the things that supposedly that we as a police department are doing that has alienated, scarred, and damaged this community. And a lot of that's true. Some of those scars are our scars. But have the courage to talk about the self-inflicted scars. Because we can have a great conference here today. Is it going to change teenage pregnancy? Is it going to make your father be active in your life? Will it change the high school dropout rate? Will it change drug addiction? Have the courage to have the complete conversation. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Mayor Nutter.
Chief, I hadn't planned to touch on this, but I mean, the issues that you raise, I think, go to the point of the policing profession. Again, we cannot expect that the Little Rock Police Department is going to solve all of these larger, broader social issues, but has a role to play. Issues of education, poverty, health disparities, incarceration, recidivism, returning citizens. All of those are elements of the problem that many of us are trying to solve, and all of us have a role to play. And so making communities safer has to be taken in a much more holistic fashion than I think we've done in the past. And your questions certainly are the right questions, and even highlight and really give voice to those kinds of issues. So one, I want to thank you for that. I want to come back to where Mayor Landrieu was. He talked about the 88% reduction in the COPS program. Again, not the director's fault. Some folks don't understand what these programs are, but you know, we have faced other national, international challenges. We talk about the Ebola today. I think we all agree that we have to do something, and again, it's not an either-or situation. We're the greatest country in the world. We should actually be able to do more than a couple things at the same time. But we were challenged in a public safety context. Some of the mayors have heard me say this before. I'm going to keep talking about this. On 9/11/2001, 2,997 people lost their lives in New York, Washington, and in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. 2 days later, a new position was created, the Office of Homeland Security. Within a year, a new department was created and a new agency, Transportation Security Administration, better known as TSA. They have about 60,000 people, $80 billion in budget. One guy had a bomb in his shoe. Now everybody takes their shoes off. More equipment than they know what to do with, more people than they at times know what to do with. And I don't know whether their budget has been cut, but last airport I was in, there were a fair number of TSA folks around. I have no issue with the TSA. Do your job, everybody's safe. My knowledge, we haven't had any folks doing any kind of crazy stuff. We did have one guy with a bomb in his underwear. Fortunately, if a policy decision was made in that regard, they chose not to move that one forward. Did a little thing with the machines and the x-rays. Maybe they're seeing a little too much of the body parts. They had to pull back on that one. Folks got a little upset. My only point is, that was 13 years ago. 2,997 people were killed on one day in a vicious attack on the United States of America. And we said, as a country, we are going to change massively every process and procedure in airline flight and airline security because we all want to be safe getting on an airplane. We hired all these folks. We've come up with all this equipment. We've changed procedures in the United States and basically around the world, because if you want to come to the United States of America, various countries had to change their process and procedure as well. And they've been in place, and they're not going anywhere because we all want to be safe getting on an airplane. I'd also like to be safe walking around my neighborhood. There has not been a comparable response to the 10,000 to 14,000 people who are killed every year in the United States of America, to the incident of that one horrific day in this country. There has not been a commensurate response to domestic terrorism, because that's what these little assholes running around our neighborhoods are. It's late in the day. My team knows I've been tremendously restrained. I was medicated earlier this morning. It has worn off. I'm gonna get a shot in about an hour and a half. I'll be good. These are terrorists, domestic terrorists in our communities that stop kids from playing in the street, folks from going to work, seniors from doing whatever it is that they want to do because they're seniors. What is our serious response to the thousands of people who are killed in our streets that is anywhere near comparable to the international terrorism threat? People get killed in America, nothing. Tell me that it had something to do with Al-Qaeda. Now, they're kind of off to the side a little bit because we've got a bunch, ISIS or ISIL, whatever they want to be called or whatever we're going to call them. They're so crazy that they got kicked out of Al-Qaeda. He said, y'all messing up our thing. We can't be with you. And now we're going to go fight them. And we should, because that's insanity. I want the same kind of dedication, focus, and response to what is going on the streets of America. We can be safe around the world, and we can be safe at home at the same time. We're the United States of America. We can actually do this. That's what I want.
All right, thanks, Mayor. Our final two comments, we're going to have Commissioner Batts, then we'll have Mayor Rawlings Blake, and then I got two housekeeping items. And the Mayor of Houston, so glad to have you here. Let's give Mayor Parker a round of applause. And we'll be hearing from you tomorrow, so awesome.
I'll be short. You know, at Harvard, I get a chance to sit with Chuck Ramsey, Ron Davis, Dean Esserman, people like that, Bill Bratton, Gary McCarthy out of Chicago, et cetera, and we debate these things on a regular basis. And listening to those who are senior to me, who've done these jobs for a long time, and that I've learned from. It also reminds me of two books that I've read out of Harvard. One was called Leadership on the Edge, or Leadership Without Easy Answers. And in that book, it basically says you have the responsibility to address tough situations. And I say this, sir, I can't see your name down there, but the response to your question, it says our responsibility is to address hard subjects. And then in the second book, Mark Moore writes, it's called Leadership on the Edge, says if you do that, you probably will get fired because you take those hard stances. What I tell young chiefs from my standpoint who are coming up behind me is that our responsibility is to stand up and talk about those hard subjects that you're talking about. I've done it in Baltimore, and I've gotten the heck beat out of me in the newspaper for doing it, but I'm not going to stop doing it. I've said it, and my mayor's called me in and spanked me on my bald head and said, don't get out in front of me too far. And I had to, sorry, Mayor, had to realign with that and address myself. But I think that comes with, part of what our responsibility is to bully pulpit. Part of our responsibility is to talk about those hard subjects. And you may lose your job, and you may have that trouble, but I agree with you. You have to have the courage not only to talk about what we've done at the police, we also have to talk about what's going on in the community. But because we do have that bully pulpit, we have to stir the pot to make changes. So I think that is correct in what you're doing. So in rhetorical to your question, I agree with you.
All right, Mayor.
Thank you. I have a whole bunch, but I know that we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to try to touch on some, and hopefully we can get back to them tomorrow. You know, to your point, and I don't know if it's commissioner or chief, you tell me. Chief, to your point, you know, when I heard you, both of the sides are right, and the issue is, especially when you talk about the issues of trust between the community and the police, the community has plenty of reasons not to trust the police, and the police have a lot of, plenty of reasons not to trust the community. But it's almost like, being in a marriage. Do you want to, how much do you want to be right? Because if you're committed to figuring out who's right, y'all, it's just going to stay a fight. And we don't have that luxury. We have to be able to say that both of us, are a little right, a lot right, and a lot wrong, and be able to move forward. And I give you this example. And right after Ferguson, we were at a church in Baltimore, filled to capacity, with the issue of police brutality. And I was, the faith leaders and others were railing on the police because of this issue. And we've had, Baltimore's like everybody else, everywhere else. We've had our issues. And as I sat there, I was so frustrated because if you were to think about the number of black men we've lost to police brutality, you couldn't fill a pew. But if you were to look at the number of, as we've been talking about, black men we've lost at our own hand, that you'd have enough chairs to fill a church, right? So I'm in that spirit. When it was my time to speak, I said, we have a serious problem, police brutality. We have to address it. I'm committed to do that. But there's something that's on my mind this evening that I feel compelled to say. And it was an issue, just like in Philadelphia, a 3-year-old playing outside of her house, shot in the head, killed. And I think today, Commissioner, they released the suspect. So at that time when I spoke, they had a suspect, but nobody would talk and give enough information so he could be charged. He was held on something else until today because nobody came forward. That other charge, the time had run up, so he's released. And I said, to the community there, I said, this wasn't a hurricane, it wasn't a flood, it wasn't an earthquake. She died at our own hands because we've decided not to talk. We've decided to be silent. And in my mind, we have, we are condoning that behavior, and we have to own that because that is a problem that, that we face every single day, that we are losing, whether it's in Baltimore or other places, losing young black lives. And I was admonished. They said, don't chastise, basically you didn't come here to chastise us. And, and I say that to say that we got to get to that point where we can both say that we're, yes, the police have a lot of reasons to distrust the public. The community has a lot of reasons to distrust the police, but we got to figure this out, and it's not going to be making one side or the other right or wrong. We got to own all of our stuff and move forward. And the last thing I'll say very briefly, and this is to Mayor Landrieu's point about, when the light starts to dim. What you talked about is around that third grade area, and that's some of the work that we talked about in Sacramento, because up until the third grade, you're learning to read at that point, and after third grade, you're reading to learn. And what disservice we do, because the stuff that we do as mayors, if we do it right, we're looking at the problem of public safety today and public safety down the road. When we allow those kids to fall behind and not read at grade level by the end of the third grade, we might be solving one problem today, but we're allowing a problem to happen in the future. So we have to figure out what it is, because we know they base the size of jails on the literacy rates in jurisdictions at third grade. It determines whether your likelihood to graduate, whether to go to jail, all of those things. So I would be interested in having more of that conversation about how we deal with the upstream problem of education and what we know that is going to do to young people, as well as a downstream problem of dealing with violent crime today.
Awesome, thanks.
Can I just add one more thing? So this is a charge then. We have to find a way to speak frankly about the institutions of government and the private sector, whether it's the police department or the prisons or the way mayor's offices work, et cetera, and the failings, and simultaneously therewith about the failure of individuals and personal responsibilities and choices that they make so that we can arrive at a better result. We don't have the space right now to have that conversation. For example, on behalf of my two fellow mayors here, I have heard them get their heads pinned back by leaders in the community by saying, hey man, don't come talk to us about A, B, C, D, E, or F. Or if I go into the community and I say to the white community, we have forsaken young African-American men, they say, man, don't talk to us about that. Go tell them about personal responsibility. I'm paraphrasing, but I think Dr. King said, man, if I knock you off that chair today, that's on me. Institution of slavery, lots of other things. But if I come back next week and you're still on the ground, that's on you, personal responsibility. It's always an either-or conversation, and it never crosses over so that it can be thoughtful and proactive and a safe space for us to work. So what I'm saying to you is the mayors up here are physical and political demonstrations that we can talk about these tough issues and still survive, which gets you to the courage part. The nation is at a place right now where she is mature enough and ready to have this conversation. And the more we slow down, the more the issues and the activities of the day, Ferguson, Trayvon Martin, will force us to have them. Instead of pushing them back, we ought to let them in. And we ought to have those conversations and say, just bring it on, because unless we get past this, right, our future, in my opinion, is going to be limited. So let's just have the discussion, and let's do it in a way where when we're finished, we're all still going to be friends. And as President Clinton said today, he really said it very clearly. You cannot live if you don't know who your neighbor is, number one, and we are so interdependent that we have got to do this because our lives depend on it. That really was what he was telling us today. And I think what he was kind of pushing us softly to do was to go ahead and step into it, to have it and have the courage that when it's done, we'll be better for it. Thank you.
Awesome. So as we close out right now, it was a great day. I want to thank everyone for their patience and hanging throughout the whole day. I think there's a lot of takeaways. We were here and are here to celebrate the COPS program. I think one of the big takeaways for us is now it's created a dialogue on a number of other issues. And I think that's what President Clinton's point was. Don't let it stop here. Let it continue and let it be a catalyst for further discussions. And I think every panelist that we've heard today did a really, really good job. I think the second point for me, what I appreciated, in addition to what everyone else says, I love where law enforcement says, you know what, we're not doing everything perfect and we can do a better job. And that's not mutually exclusive. I think that was a great statement for us. So we've got to do a better job, and we all want to be a part of the solution. My quick housekeeping items are tours are going to start. Docents are right outside here at 5:30. You'll get a tour, and then dinner's at 6:30 for those who want to eat here. And we're really excited for our program tomorrow. And then lastly, if you're Arkansas mayor, raise your hand. Okay, all the Arkansas mayors, you're going to come up and take a photo with a few folks. So Arkansas mayors, come up. Everybody else, enjoy the tour, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.